Shalom, Saints, and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Arthur Bailey. Today's broadcast was recorded live at House of Israel. Did you know that you can attend our services live on the internet every Saturday at 11 a.m. and our Thursday discipleship training every Thursday at 7 p.m.? All you have to do is go to www.arthurbaileyministries.com/TV. That's www.arthurbaileyministries.com/TV. I look forward to having you join us for our live internet broadcast. And now, enjoy today's broadcast.
House of Israel services are held weekly at 1334 Hill Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28210. 11 a.m. Saturday mornings and 7 p.m. Thursday evenings, Eastern Standard Time. The following broadcast is made possible by generous contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. Motivating, inspiring, challenging, encouraging, deepening, strengthening, and enhancing your faith. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur Bailey.
Today, as I said, our message is preparing for the Spring Feasts of YeHoVaH. And I want to encourage you, because what we're going to be doing is I want you to really begin to bring your Bible and something to write with and something to write on, because here's what I'm seeing in my own life. You know, I've been at this for some time, and I still feel, based on what I see the Father doing in my midst, is that there's a lot of things that he's revealing and showing me that I've not seen. I've been incredibly amazed over the last few months of the words that he's been depositing in my spirit to share with people. And these words have been words of correction to me. They've been words of instruction. A few weeks ago, right in this very spot, the Father walked me through some deliverance. I mean, I'm standing here being delivered and enjoying it. And it's like, you know, this is a weird time to take me through some deliverance while I'm standing here ministering to your people. And, you know, he don't need an invitation. You know, once we say to him and pray, Father, let your will be done in my life, that tells him whenever he chooses to do whatever he chooses to do, our role is simply to let him. And I'm standing here, and it's just absolutely amazing that I'm dealing with things that I thought that I had dealt with. You know, dealing with issues of fear that I thought I had let go of and had overcome. And yet he's revealing these things to me, and now I'm standing here having to deal with them while at the same time give to you what he's placing in me to give to you. When we are in our leadership, and we're going to be going through some of this in the leadership development on how the Father uses the people of the Bible to teach us lessons. He exposes not only their successes, but he also exposes their failures and how we can learn from those who've gone before us. Or we can keep bumping our heads and making the same old dumb mistakes over and over and over again, continue to go around the same old mountain for 40 years, and I choose not to do that. You know, it's time for us to be about our Father's business. Let him do whatever it is that he needs to do. Let him deliver where he needs to deliver. Stop resisting, stop grieving, stop fighting, and just let him have his way. It'll be a lot easier for you. Believe me. YeHoVaH chose a people out of the world who had been influenced by the world and called them his set-apart people, or modern day saints. And you'll hear me using the term saints a lot. And the reason why I use the term saints is because saints today is actually the word for sanctified, or the person who is sanctified, that one who is set apart. Now, I know it sounds like a churchy tune, and people don't like to be called saints, and the Catholics have taken this word and made people saints who are incredibly, people who have met their standard of sainthood. But the bottom line is that every one of us who have been set apart, every one of us who have been sanctified, set apart, have been called to be a saint. And so we don't have to resist this. We don't have to reject it. We need to learn how to embrace what the Father says about you and I. Are you with me? Now, he knew when he chose these people that they had already been infected. They had already been affected by the world in which they live in. Now, this is powerful for us, because YeHoVaH has a people in Egypt that have been in bondage for many, many years. These individuals dealt with whatever a slave had to deal with: the fear of man, the fear of authority, the fear of people, persecution, subjection, treated less than human, as possessions, as property. Folks taking ownership, being at the lowest state. Animals were more precious than the slaves were. And this is a people that the Father chose a servant to go and get. Says, I want you to go to Egypt, and I want you to tell the most powerful person on earth, these are my people. And I want you to let them go. And if you don't let them go, ultimately what he showed them is that they weren't as powerful as they thought they were, which is a lesson to us. You see, there's powerful people, but there's the all-powerful Elohim. And that's who we serve. You hear what I'm saying? So now he's got to get Egypt out of the people. He's got to get the world out of the people. Can you see the correlation here? He's brought us out in, and now he's trying to get that which was out in us, out of us, so that we now can be free to focus and to allow him to cleanse us and to make us a holy people. You're going to see how all this fit. You see, because the Almighty is holy, he wants a holy people. Deuteronomy 7:6. YeHoVaH wants his people to be holy. He says, for thou art a holy people unto YeHoVaH, thy Elohim. He's calling Israel holy. He's calling his people holy. YeHoVaH, your Elohim, have chosen you to be a special people. These words are to us. He's called you to be a special people. And regardless to what you think about you, this is what he thinks about you. And at some point, you have to exchange what you think about you to what he thinks about you. And when that happens, what you will find is that a lot of fear just goes away. Because it is fear. It's when you look at your own capacity, when you look at your own ability, when you look at your own level of education, when you look at your own intellect, when you look at your own speech pattern, when you look at that which you don't believe you can do, it is those things that keep us from walking in what he say we can do, because we are the ones who put the restrictions based on the limitations we see in ourselves when we look at ourselves in the mirror. He doesn't see all of that. And so he doesn't accept excuses. This is why he wouldn't let Moses off the hook. I know, Moses, you're looking at what you've done, and I know, Moses, you're looking at, what you want to do, and I know you want to be left alone, Moses, but you need to know, Moses, that you was born into this. And what I mean by being born into it, everything in creation belongs to him. And whether you surrender, whether you submit, whether you give up and give in, does not negate the fact that you belong to him, which is why at the end of the journey, you are going to have to give an account to him. Every human being on the planet, saint, sinner, atheist, ungodly, pagan, it doesn't matter what they call themselves, every knee will bow. So you don't have a right to take your life hostage. You belong to him, and the sooner you get that through your noggin, the better. Seriously. Verse 7, or continuation in verse 6. YeHoVaH, your Elohim, have chosen you to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. YeHoVaH did not set his love upon you, nor choose you because you were more in number than any people, for you were the fewest of all people. But because YeHoVaH loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, have YeHoVaH brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So this is why. Because I loved you, because I love you, and because of the oath I swore to your fathers. Now you got to understand that these individuals have been in Egypt now over 400 years. He had already said to Abraham that they were going to be taken into bondage. Now when you look at over 400 years, America is how many years old? 1776, 18, 19, 20. I mean, we're not, this country is less than 300 years old. Imagine. Right? Imagine. I see folk going like, I just want to make sure I'm in the ballpark. I never was that good at math, folks. So I have to depend on the experts. Anyway, Egypt was in bondage longer than America has existed by that name. Can you understand that? So think about it. When we look at the founding fathers of this country, this nation, and we think about the duration of Egypt being in bondage, I mean, we still got 100 and some odd years to go before we even get to a point to where the time America is a nation that Israel was in bondage to Egypt. And what does all that mean? Well, what all that means is that they were there. There were people in Egypt that were born and died, generation after generation. The people who were delivered had seen their great, if they had the opportunity to see their great grandparents who were born and died in Egypt. That's all they had ever known. Now, you have to understand this, because if you don't understand this, you won't understand why they got out into the wilderness and began to complain. There was a legitimacy to their complaint, but their complaint was an indication to their lack of faith in the one who delivered them. You see, there's some legitimacy to your complaints. There's some legitimacy to how you feel about how you've been treated, how people have done you, wrongs that have been done to you, people who have taken advantage of you, things that you've done to people. There are legitimacy to the complaints that you may wager. You may be in a situation right now to where you feel like a slave. You feel like you're in bondage. I know a lot of wives who feel oppressed. I know husbands who feel oppressed. They feel that there's always somebody watching over them, always somebody trying to tell them what to do. They just want to be free. They just want to be happy. And there's some legitimacy to your complaint. Where the illegitimacy comes in is how you begin to pursue your freedom. You see, if the Son don't set you free, you're not free, even though you may pursue freedom and think you are. If he don't set you free, you are not free. And guess what? I don't care how powerful the tyrants, how powerful the bosses, how powerful the organization. It could be the Illuminati. It could be the Masons. It could be the Rothschilds. It could be the builder. It could be whoever out there with all the money. They still don't come close to him. He's the one who puts up one and takes down another. He's the one who holds the hearts of men, even your husband. He's the one who holds the hearts of women, even your wife. And instead of you trying to argue and whip her into shape, leave her alone and let him deal with you. And if you let him deal with you and you get to a place to where you are desiring to please him, he'll deal with that. Sometimes we just have to get out of the way. You see, Pharaoh was simply in the way. The people could focus on Pharaoh for their issues. Pharaoh was their problem. The Father wanted to show them Pharaoh wasn't their problem. Their problem was them. Your problem is you. My problem is me. And the moment I recognize that, I leave you alone. Because I can't even manage my own life. How in the world am I going to try to manage yours? I'm having a hard enough time just trying to walk with YeHoVaH by myself. You see? And he's trying to say, Arthur, your wife is not your problem. Now, let me show you. He moved her out the way. Now what? Now what you gonna do? You see? So he'll move these things out of the way just to show you who your real problem is. As long as there's these smoke screens and as long as there's these people that you can point to and blame for what's going on in your life, you can feel justified for where you are. Know therefore that YeHoVaH your Elohim, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments. And there it is, to 1,000 generations. Now you do the calculation. By some people's measurements, a generation is 20 years. Some people measure the generation by 40 years. But imagine, just multiply 20 times 1,000. 20 years, if you multiply 20 years as a generation time 1,000, see how many years that is. I dare you to do the math. So you look at, and I look at my life and the duration of 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. I mean, that's less than 6 generations by the 20 number. And he's saying showing mercy and keeping covenant to 1,000 generations. Let me tell you something. You will live and die. Your children will live and die. Your children's children will live and die. Your children's children's children will live and die. Your children's children's children will live and die. And he's still keeping covenant and showing mercy to them that love him. And repaid them that hate him to their face. You see, this is why he said, listen, no. Don't go off on them. That's my job. You just step aside and work on you. I got this. Let me have them. Let me tell you something. Your enemies are not nearly at risk in your hands as they are in the hands of your Father. Now, the difference between you and him is that you want your enemies destroyed. He wants your enemies saved. And guess what? You ain't trying to get your enemies saved. You see the problem? So right there's a conflict. Father's resisting you in dealing with your enemies because, hey, you in the wrong spirit. He says, I'll destroy them. He will not be slack to him that hateth him. He will repay him to his face. You shall therefore keep the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which I command thee this day to do them. Now, to do this, he gave them commandments. And this is what gets us into the feast. He gave them ordinances and judgments for them to conduct themselves by within the world. In his commandments, he gave 7 annual festivals. He gave a weekly festival, Shabbat. He gave a monthly festival, the new moon. And so when we look at these, feasting was a part of the observance of these festivals in connection with the suffering or the offering up of sacrifices. Now, when we come into Messiah, our sacrifices are our own lives. But imagine if you are unfamiliar with sacrifices. You will not know how to perform a sacrifice of self. You will do like the church says. You will offer sacrifices of praise. Basically, you'll give the Father lip service. Oh, I love you, Yahweh. Oh, I just love you, God. And you know, I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but there are people who feel that they truly love him based on these actions. And in essence, based on the standard of what they have been taught by religion, they love him according to their religion. So I don't deny a person love the Almighty, but let me tell you something. If you've been taught loving him is keeping his commandments, then you're going to keep his commandments to demonstrate you love him. If you've been taught loving him is going to church every Sunday and, morning and evening and midweek services, then you're going to be there Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings and whatever midweek service. If you've been taught that loving him is serving your fellow men and going on mission trips and building schools in China or in Africa or in Haiti, then you're going to be on the mission team. You're going to do whatever the denomination, the church, the organization says, this is how you show you love God. And by that standard, you love him. And everybody around you who see you and who know you and observe your life, they will say that that person loves the Lord. Look at how they live. They're doing everything the denomination says that a person who loves God will do. And you can't tell them they don't love him. Now, the Bible says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. This is what the Bible says. But the church says, we're not under the law. We're under grace. And this is how you love God. And so the church have moved people from a biblical love to a church love, to an agape church love. And they got wonderful fancy words that they've picked up from the Greek. You understand what I'm saying? And the Father has made it clear. He says, showing love to 1,000 generations. Get it? That love him and keep his commandments. So it's more than just expressing love. It's a demonstration of obedience to his word. These annual feasts were designed to keep the people's consciousness alive, to revive, to strengthen, and perpetuate harmony and unity among the people. Now, while they were in the wilderness, this was easy to do. It was a lot easier to do, if I may say. The 7 annual feasts were divided into what we know today as the Spring Feast of YeHoVaH and the Fall Feast of YeHoVaH. The Spring Feast of YeHoVaH consists of, and there are different words that you need to be aware of, because when you see these words, you need to make the connection. In the Bible, if you are in the King James Bible, you're going to find Pesach. Well, you won't find Pesach unless you look up the word Passover. But you'll also find that Pesach, Passover, is in a particular month or a particular season. It is called Aviv. In some cases, in the King James, it's Abib, but it is also in some places in the Bible, Nisan. So you will see in the King James, Abib, and you will see Nisan. You'll see Abib in the Torah. You'll see Nisan in the writings. And there's a reason for that. Because in the Torah, when the people were in the first 5 books, they were under the kingdom and kingship of YeHoVaH. When they went into captivity, they lived in another kingdom. They were taken out of the kingdom of Israel, and now they're in the kingdom of Babylon. And in Babylon, there's another name for the names of months. Just like here in America, there's another name for the names of months. So you will look at a Jewish calendar, you'll look at a Hebrew calendar, and you'll see this month, the month of March, you'll look on a Hebrew calendar and you will see Adar. And these days don't coincide because the month begins with the first day of the month at the conclusion of the last month on the Gregorian calendar that doesn't always coincide with the new moon. And so you'll see the new moon in the middle of the Gregorian calendar month. But on a Hebrew calendar, you'll see that the month in the Hebrew calendar begins in the middle of the month of the Gregorian calendar, and that creates some confusion for people. And the Father is saying, you know, you can either allow yourself to be confused or you could try to get on my calendar and figure this thing out. But no, we want it easy. You just tell us, Moses, what he says, and we'll do it. And the Father is saying, listen, you be your Moses. Because you got to understand, Moses didn't enter in, and neither did they. And that's a story all in itself. You can't put your spiritual journey, walk, and life in the hands of no apostle, no prophet, no evangelist, no pastor, no teacher, no bishop, no husband, no wife, no daddy, no mama. That's your responsibility because you are the one who's going to have to stand before him and give an account. And you're talking about, I was so confused. Well, you was confused because you was engaging in all that other stuff that causes confusion. Pesach, Passover, Aviv, Nisan. Now, it's important, and we'll get into this a little bit later, to understand that Aviv is not the name of a month. Nisan is the name of a month. Nisan has no meaning other than it's the first month of the Babylonian calendar / Jewish calendar / some Hebrew calendars. Aviv is the condition of a crop. Now, this is important for you to know because somehow you got to determine when the month begins. The second feast, Matzah, Unleavened Bread. It is also in the month of the Aviv. The third feast in the spring feast is Habikarim, the Firstfruits. And then the Firstfruits is the beginning of the counting up to the latter harvest, which is also Firstfruits. Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, known in modern day vernacular as Pentecost. Now, it's amazing that there are Pentecostals who don't keep Pentecost. Because it's a denomination. It's a religion. You know, we're Pentecostals. Oh, yeah? Tell me about Shavuot. Shavuot? What did you say? Y'all don't mind if we have just a teeny bit of fun up in your knee. And then there's the fall feast. We're not talking about those this time around. We'll talk about them at another time, which is beginning on Tishrei 1, the Yom Teruah. Now, what you're going to find is that you cannot determine the fall feast by the first of the year. Tishrei 1 is the beginning of the 7th month. It's the first day of the 7th month. And of course, you have to determine, how do you determine the beginning of the month? You see. Oh, y'all getting it? I know many of you got it already, but, you know, we got some new people. Then you have Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. This is in the month Tishrei as well. And Sukkot, also called Feast of Booths, Tabernacles in some gatherings, and in-gatherings. Those are different names that is associated with these particular feasts. And so depending on what version of the Bible you read, you'll see one of these words in those places identifying the Feast of YeHoVaH. The first month of the year, the first Passover. There are some confusion, and our role here today is to really try to clear up some of that confusion concerning the first month of Passover. Now, people who are on a calendar that doesn't say Aviv or Abib, if the calendar says Nisan, then you'll see Nisan 1, and that is the first day of the month. But the word Abib means ear in the corn. That's what the word means. And that word in itself says, in order to determine the month Aviv, the word itself tells you that there has to be something as it relates to a harvest. And we'll see that here in just a moment. In Exodus chapter 1, we're going to see chapter 12, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 18. We get the workings of the first Passover. And Jehovah spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. So the Almighty has determined the beginning of months. Those who follow a Jewish calendar are familiar with the term Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah is the celebration of the Jewish New Year. Now, make no mistake about it, that Rosh Hashanah is the celebration of the Jewish New Year. Now, that's important. And the reason why that's important is because we, just as we've been groomed in our society to be workers, we've been groomed by religion to read the Bible and not believe it. We've been groomed to believe what the church tells us versus what we read on our own. We've been groomed to be led by those in leadership instead of being led by the Spirit. We've also been groomed to ignore spiritual things. You see, the Bible says you need no man to lead you. You are supposed to. How can those who are led by the Spirit be sons and daughters of YeHoVaH and you are being led by the church? Whose sons are you? No wonder the preacher said, that's my son. Oh yeah? Is your wife his mother? Well, spiritually speaking. Now, the preacher got sons and daughters in the Spirit. And they can justify all of this stuff. And, you know, anyway, we won't go there. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. When it comes down to the things of Jewishness, some folks will say, you have a problem? I don't have a problem with Jewish things. I have a problem when Jewish things are being attributed to being biblical. Rosh Hashanah is a term that is identified and celebrated as the Jewish New Year. Now, the question is it the biblical New Year? By every intent, it is indeed the Jewish New Year. But it is not the biblical New Year. And you need to understand that. Lest you get on a Jewish path and leave the biblical path. And let me tell you something, there's a lot of people out there on the Jewish path, and they associate Jewish things with biblical things. And you need to be able to distinguish between Jewish things and biblical things, because you're going to find yourself, if you're not doing Jewish things, thinking you're doing what the Bible teach. It's no different than doing Christian things, thinking you're doing what the Bible teach. No different. So you're doing what the Bible teach. No different. So you can leave the Christian church and go to the Jewish church. What you want to do is find out what he says and get on his page and go to his assembly and to gather with those who are on that page, on that path. And let me tell you something, it's narrow. It's not broad. May not have a mega shuol. May not have a mega, assembly. But it is not about the number of people. It is about the people who recognize who they are. Because let me tell you something. If Yeshua can take 12 men minus 1, 11, and turn the world upside down, you don't need a whole lot of people to turn the world upside down. By every right intent and naysayer out there, we shouldn't be on TV. But we are. And we shouldn't be on as many channels and as many stations as we are. But we are. And we're right out there with all of the big names of people that, you read about and hear about. And it's amazing when you got someone who have a congregation of 15,000, 20,000 people on TV, and then right after or right before, there I am. Same channel. You understand what I'm saying? That's the work of the Almighty. You don't need a whole lot of people to do the will of the Father. All you need is a commitment, a heart, and submit to him and allow him to do what he wants to do through you. So, Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, but it's not the biblical New Year. And so a person who wants to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, that's wonderful. You just know what you're celebrating. And this is what this is all about. It's not opposed to this or that. It's just you need to know. If you're gonna celebrate Jewish things, just know you're celebrating Jewish things. If you're gonna celebrate Christian things, just know you're celebrating Christian things. If you're gonna celebrate paganism, just know you're celebrating paganism. Just know what you're doing. That's all I'm saying. But don't do it thinking you're celebrating him. Because he says, don't celebrate me like that. You want to celebrate him, then you need to find out how he wants to be celebrated. Speak unto the congregation, verse 3, unto all the congregation of Israel, saying in the 10th day of this month. Now, in order to get to the 10th day, you got to identify when the first day is. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the question is how do you identify? And there is no verse, there is no passage that says that you have to look for the barley and the new moon and they have to coincide with each other. Doesn't say that. You have to really search to find the correlation. But let me end your search today. When you look at the biblical term is Aviv. Aviv is the condition of a harvest. It is not the name of a month. It is the condition of a harvest. The month begins with the new moon. Every month begins with the new moon. If Aviv is the condition of a harvest, then the harvest has to be at a certain condition when the new moon is sighted in order for there to be an Aviv. If it's not a condition of a harvest, then there is no Aviv. And if the first month begins with the sighting of the new moon and the harvest, which is Aviv, then now you have the first day. If the harvest is not Aviv and you sight the new moon, then now you go into a new month, which is not Aviv, which could be a 13th month or an Adar Bet, which is a second Adar. Is that what you say? But see, what you're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, please. If we learn to pursue the Almighty like we pursue some stuff, oh, we'd be a whole lot better. We just have to learn to pursue him. And he says, you want to find me, you're going to have to look for me. I will not just show myself to anybody unless, of course, I'm coming to knock some folks down. You see. But he says, seek while he may be found. Seek and you shall find. If you don't seek, you're not going to find. Well, Pastor, you seek for me and tell me what he say. Because it's so confusing. In the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto him, unto his house, take it according to the number of the souls, every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. And what he's simply saying here is, listen, if it takes 5 people to consume this lamb and there's only 2 people in your house, then you need to find a neighbor who has 3 people so that all of you all together now can consume this lamb. That's basically what he's saying here. Now, get this, verse 5. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goat. The average person, though, always associate Passover with what? With the sheep. with the lamb. And you can see how we can be led, because, you know, you got people say, well, do you have to have lamb? No, you can have goat. Okay, I'm having fun, too much fun. Let's keep it moving. And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. So what is he saying? On the 10th day of the month, you take a goat or a lamb. You keep it to the 14th day of that same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Now, that doesn't mean all of Israel come to your house to kill your lamb or goat. That means the 5 people that's going to eat it is going to kill it. And whoever is designated among those to do it, let them do it. Now, what you're going to find is that tradition begins to get in play here, and now all of a sudden it is the firstborn, or typically the firstborn, who's responsible for the slaying of the animal. And it's like, where is that coming from? Now, I'm going to show you as we get into this teaching how much Judaism and tradition has affected what we call Passover. Let me give you a spoiler. There is no such word in the Bible called a Seder. You won't find it. Let me give you another spoiler alert. There's no place in the Bible you will find a Haggadah. Now that I've given you the spoiler alerts, let's keep it moving. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on upper door posts of the houses wherein they shall eat it. And now we're going to find the menu. Because some folks, you know, they need to know what's the menu? What are we supposed to eat? And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. And so what we see here is we see unleavened bread, we see a roasted lamb, and we see bitter herbs. Those are 3 things we see, but understand this is the first Passover. Now, let me give you another spoiler alert. The first Passover was done in Egypt. You say, well, we know that. Now, I say this because based on what I'm about to read, there are people who say that if you're going to celebrate the Passover, you got to do it according to this chapter. And I say, well, if you're going to do it according to this chapter, then you need to go to Egypt to celebrate the Passover. Because this is the only place it was done like this. Are you following me? Folks, don't turn your brain off when you read the Bible. If you mess around and turn your brain off, then you're at the mercy of someone else's interpretation. And that's how we made so many mistakes in our past, following people who really didn't know what they talking about. But they were good at selling their product. See, when you find a salesman who know how to sell, they'll sell you stuff you not only don't need, but don't even want. And when they're gone, it's like, what happened? I don't even want this. Because they're good at what they do. And no is not an option. It's always a deal you can't refuse. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof. That's the inward parts. And you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remaineth of it until the morning you shall burn with fire. And thus shall you eat it with your loins. Now let me say something here. Because either all the lamb or goat was eaten and there was no need to burn anything Because we certainly don't see in this passage where they burnt anything the morning after. We have to read what's there and not read into it. You understand what I'm saying? And thus shall you eat it. Here's the other part. With your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you're going to gobble this down. You're going to eat it in haste. You're going to eat in a hurry. It's not going to be a 2-hour ordeal. Folks, now. Is it time to eat yet? Food's getting cold, vegetables overcooked. Folks looking at their watch. What we know today as a Passover Seder, you won't find it in here. No matter how hard you look. I'm going to show you. You mind? Now, I'm not trying to burst the Passover Seder. All I'm trying to help you to see is what's in here and what's not in here, so that whenever you do what you do, you understand and know what it is you're doing. You're not doing something thinking you're doing what the Bible says. Is that all right? Good. So, you're going to eat it how? In haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt, just in case they forgot where they were, this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Now, I need to go back, because when we look at Exodus chapter 3 or chapter 12, we see the first month, but we don't see a name for it. So I want you to turn real quickly with me to Exodus chapter number 13. Just one chapter over. And we will find in verse number 4, this day came you out in the month Aviv. Now, unfortunately, Strong's Concordance don't do a good job on this word. And so you're going to have to look at some additional resources in order to understand Aviv, because it doesn't give a good definition. Another place, Exodus chapter 23. Exodus chapter 23. Verse number 15. Thou shalt keep, or verse 14, 3 times you shall keep a feast unto me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days as I commanded you in the time appointed of the month of Aviv. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. So there's a couple of references that they came out in the month of Aviv. Now you're going to see the importance of this as we find that here in Exodus chapter 12, he's about to bring them out in the first month. And it's actually the night of the 14th, actually the day of the 15th, the first day of unleavened bread, which, by the way, another spoiler alert, they didn't keep a holy convocation. They was traveling in a hurry with all kinds of stuff, trying to get out of Egypt on the first day of unleavened bread. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out to you is because the Father gave additional instructions on how we are to keep these feasts once we entered into the land, which was different than how they were kept the first time he introduced them. He gave them the instruction. But understand something. He said that on the first day of unleavened bread, you must have a holy convocation. This is the Almighty's word. Whereas the Almighty on the first day of unleavened bread had them traveling. Now, is the Almighty contradicting himself? No, he's not. Because if he's giving the instruction, he's giving the instruction. You see, is he going to hold against us violating the instruction that he's giving us when he says, this is what you shall do? Some folks, you know, they say to me, you know, brother, you work on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest. And it is. But the instruction says that the priest on the Sabbath day has some work to do. And they, by doing their work on the Sabbath day, is not violating the Sabbath day. As a matter of fact, the offerings on the Sabbath day that the priest had to offer was twice as much as the rest of the week, which not only did the priests work hard on the Sabbath, they worked twice as hard. But this is his instruction. So am I violating his instruction by working on the Sabbath? No. But if you work on the Sabbath outside of a priestly function, then you would be violating his Sabbath. And when we get to Numbers 15, we're going to find that there was one who did, and guess what? He got the first death penalty. Okay, back to Exodus chapter 12, and we're going to bring this to a close now, and I'll give you some further instructions. The word month here is the word Chodesh. Chodesh. When you look at the first month, in the 10th day of the first month, or the word month, means Chodesh, and the Chodesh is the new moon. By implication, a month or new moon. Again, the word Aviv, and let me give you the Hebrew on this, because let me tell you something, Haggadah is a Hebrew word. Seder is a Hebrew word. There are Hebrew words that are not in the Bible. Doesn't mean that they're not Hebrew words. They're just not in the Bible. And so, if there are Hebrew words that is associated to things that is associated with the Bible, does that make that Hebrew word association biblical? So what you say? Aviv, an ear of corn. That's what it says. The pre-exilic name for the first month, and it's typically around, is between March and April of the year, according to the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar that we're on, which is the modified Julian calendar, like, so what? And we find this term in Exodus 13:4, Exodus 23:15, Exodus 34:18. We also find it in some other places, but it is called Nisan after the exile. Aviv, the month of the Exodus deliverance from Egypt, and thus of the Passover festival. The other place there is Deuteronomy 16:1. a harvest month covering parts of March and April. Aviv means ears of grain. Later, the month was called Nisan, and you'll find that term in Esther, and there's a couple of other places. The two words associated with Passover are Haggadah or Haggadah and Seder. And these, as I said, they're both Hebrew words. But I've not been able to find them in the Bible. The Haggadah, and we can find out where it came from. The Haggadah was written by Jews, for Jews. And every reference that you look up is going to point you to Judaism. Haggadah was written by Jews, for Jews, at a time when most Jews observed, or at least were familiar with Jewish law and custom. Traditionally, families and friends gather in the evening to read the text of the Haggadah, an ancient work derived from the Mishnah. Now we're going to see where it came from. The Haggadah contains the narrative of the Israelite exodus from Egypt, special blessings and rituals, commentaries from the Talmud. So we're getting a little deeper. And special Passover songs. The term Talmud can be used to mean either the Gemara alone or the Mishnah and Gemara as printed together. The Talmud has two components. The first part is the Mishnah, Hebrew, the written compendium of Judaism's oral Torah. Torah meaning instruction. So it's the oral instruction. In Judaism, it is believed when Moses went up into the Mount Sinai, he received two forms of instructions, written instruction and the oral instructions. The oral instructions were passed down from generation to generation by the elders. And when you look at how it was passed down, it wasn't given to the elders in Moses' day. These were later elders. Now it's important, ladies and gentlemen, because by association and practice, when we practice something over a period of time, the assumption, just like Sunday church, the assumption is this is how it's supposed to be done. It's an assumption because we've done it over and over. And that's part of the Mishnah, it's part of the Talmud, is repetition. We learn by repetition. And so now you have people who argue over how the Passover Seder is supposed to be conducted and the components of the Passover Seder. Now I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. You will find that there are many Passovers in the Bible, but at none of those Passovers do you find an order on how a Passover was conducted. The second part is the Gemara, 500 Common Era, an elucidation of the Mishnah and related Tanaitic writings that often venture onto other subjects and expounds broadly on the Hebrew Bible. It's an elucidation of the Mishnah and related Tanaitic writings that often ventures onto other subjects and expounds broadly on the Hebrew writing. Now notice when I put bold and underlined, that means that I'm going to give you a definition of sort. The word Tanaitic came from the word Tana, which means repeaters, teachers, rabbinic sages whose views are recorded in the Mishnah from approximately 10 of the Common Era to 220 of the Common Era. So now you can date it. You can begin to identify when these things begin to emerge. And ladies and gentlemen, they emerged long after the Torah and the prophets. The word Seder literally means order in Hebrew. That's the definition of it, order. And every person who does a Seder will tell you it's the order. It is the order of the service. Everything is done decently and in order, right? So there's an order. The name comes from the fact that there are 15 parts of the ritual service. 15 parts. Now in Judaism, in the families, all 15 of these parts are done. And in many Seders in Messianic Judaism, they're done. Now let me give you another spoiler. If I create a event and I take parts of the Bible and insert parts of the Bible into this event and in the order, and then I tell you this means this, and here's the scripture reference. This means that, and here's a scripture reference. This means that, and here's a scripture reference. What I've just done is given you a typical Christian sermon. I have cut and pasted and preached. That's what I've done. And it's all scripture. It's wow, that's deep. Man, that's heavy. Yeah, it is. The name again comes from the fact that there are 15 parts of the ritual service, all revolving around the upcoming Passover dinner. Seder customs include telling the story, discussing the story, drinking 4 cups of wine. Got to have 4 cups of wine. And you got to have the cup of Elijah. Elijah wasn't even born when the Passover was given. How did Elijah get in the Passover? Ask yourself. I'm just trying to help us understand what we're doing. Because once you understand what you're doing, you could do it with more meaning. You could do it and experience a more fuller experience. Just don't start saying that's biblical. Because the moment you start saying that's biblical, now you're taking that which was given to the Jewish people by the sages, which is part of the oral tradition, which now brings you under rabbinic authority. And they're saying, look at those fools. We told them the Passover Seder is for the Jewish people. Y'all ain't Jews. Ouch. Yeah, the Passover Seder is for the Jews. Passover is for YeHoVaH's people. We're supposed to celebrate the Passover. Now the question is, how? Do we do a Jewish Passover? Do we do a biblical Passover? And the issue becomes, well, how do you do the Passover? Well, let's look at how the Jewish did it. They must have known what was supposed to be done, because after all, those are God's chosen people. Listen, the Jewish people are not the chosen people of God. The Hebrew people are the chosen people of God. The Jews are of one tribe, and that's Judah. Judah does not encompass Israel. Israel consisted of 12 tribes. Judah is only one tribe. Judah is a part of the house of Israel. Actually, they're the house of Judah. YeHoVaH gave his covenant to Israel, not to Judah. Gave it to Israel. But there again, religion. Because just as religion has told us we don't have to do what this Bible says, just as religion says that if you love God, you'll do what we teach you to do, and in order to be identified as one who loves God, you're doing what the church deems is what people who love God should do. The church also told us that if you're not Jew, you're Gentile. And what does Jehovah say about you? That's who you should be concerned about. Well, I'm not Jewish. So what? That does not exclude you from the commands. Now, if a people put a claim to the Bible and say that's ours, and you buy into it, now what you feel you have to do in order to embrace that is you have to become one of them. Isn't that what the Bible teach? That if you want to take part of the Passover, that now your males have to be circumcised? And only the Jewish males are circumcised? Listen, Abraham wasn't a Jew. Abraham wasn't the first Jew. Do you hear what I'm saying? Abraham was the father and is, according to the scripture, the father of many nations. He had two sons, Isaac, and who else? Ishmael. Isaac had how many sons? Now, let's go back. Abraham had how many sons? He did. Where that is in the Bible? Genesis 25. Chapter 25. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shaul. So he had 6 more. So we see that Abraham had a total of 8 sons. 8 of them. And do you think Abraham taught them the Torah? See, Abraham was chosen according to the Almighty because he was going to teach his children to keep the commands. Back to Exodus, and we'll bring this portion to a close. The Seder custom again includes the telling, the story, discussing the story, or discussing the story, drinking 4 cups of wine, eating matzah, partaking of symbolic foods placed on the Passover Seder. Still can't figure out how that egg got there, and reclining in celebration of freedom. The Seder is performed in much the same way by Jews all over the world. There's no identifiable order of service for the Passover found in the Old or New Testament. There is no identifiable order found in the Old or New Testament. Yeshua celebrated several Passovers in his lifetime, but not once do we find an order even of those celebrations. In his lifetime, the first Passover, he went to Jerusalem. We don't see an order. We see him following an instruction, but we don't see an order of a Passover. We see that the night he was betrayed, he took bread, and many would love for that to be a Passover. But it was his Last Supper. It wasn't a Passover. Yeshua was the Passover. He couldn't eat the Passover because he was the Passover. What he celebrated with his disciples was a last meal. Sit. Proof? Some suggest the Last Supper was a Passover Seder, but that seemed highly unlikely and improbable, for according to John's Gospels, we read Then led they Yeshua from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves, now you got to understand that Yeshua was captured that night, and the events of that night took place after he had his last meal. And it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Now, I know that there's some scriptures in Matthew and Mark, and when we get into the Passover teaching, we're going to lay that out for you, and we're going to show you that the Last Supper had nothing to do with the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is a Jewish concoction. Plain and simple. And so Passover is a holy day that has been given to us by the Almighty with no clear identifiable means of how we are to conduct a Passover meal. So going into that, we now have some freedom. We have some liberty. We don't have to do things a certain way because it has been done a certain way by certain people over the centuries, and we don't have to put a messianic twist to a Jewish thing. Because that's what people will try to do. They'll try to take it and put a messianic twist at Yeshua or Jesus and make it Christian or messianic. It's not what we're trying to do. What I want us to do is to be a people of truth, so that when we communicate truth, and if we practice something, we don't associate it as truth, we associate it as a practice. But I'll tell you something, when you practice something over a period of time, you see what happens is that a practice becomes something fun. Over time, a practice becomes a tradition. Over time, the tradition becomes scripture. You have to do it this way. And that's what has happened. A practice became a tradition, and a tradition became the way it should be done. And Yeshua made it very clear, beware. Beware of the practices. Beware of the teachings. Beware of the traditions of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and of Herod. Beware of their teachings. Now, as we continue on in this message next week, we're going to continue to lay out, because as we move into this season, there are some things that are required of us. And that's what we want to focus on. We want to focus on that which is required, and we are commanded to celebrate. We are commanded to celebrate the Passover. That's a command. You can't get away from it. And I'm going to show you why. We're not commanded to do a Jewish Passover Seder. Do you understand what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Now, if people want to do a Jewish Passover Seder and you want to participate in it, by all means, you just know what you're doing.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. This program is made possible through financial contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.
From the beginning of time, from the beginning of the creation of man, YeHoVaH has been communicating with mankind. Adam and Eve, kings and pharaohs, even the common man has been given direction from the Almighty. But there are other voices, voices that can lead to curses, despair, and even death. How can you distinguish God's voice? How do you know what His voice sounds like? In his dynamic, life-changing teaching, How to Hear God's Voice, author and teacher Arthur Bailey shares important biblical truth that will help you identify and distinguish the voice of the Almighty from all other voices.
Yeshua says when the word of YeHoVaH has been sown in the heart, the enemy comes immediately. He comes to steal it. Because if he can take that word out of you before you get a chance to operate in it, you'll never see the expectation that you should have and the manifestation of why the Father spoke to you in the first place.
In this teaching DVD collection, you will learn why YeHoVaH communicates with His people, why He wants you to hear His voice, how to identify His voice from others, where He's most likely to speak to you, and so much more.
When you get in His Word, you are literally getting to know Him. A reading of the Bible is like a conversation with the Almighty if your heart is open for Him to speak to you through His Word.
Now, for your gift of $45 or more, Arthur would like to send you as his gift to you this 4-DVD collection, How to Hear God's Voice. Each DVD presents clear insight that will strengthen, edify, and encourage your faith in God. Call the number on your screen, visit our website, or write Arthur Bailey Ministries, P.O. Box 1182, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29716. This teaching is a must for every true believer. Call or write today and have your relationship with the Almighty grow stronger and stronger.
Yeshua explains to His disciples the importance of the talent and maximizing your talent through the parable of the wise and wicked servant. The difference between the wise servant and the wicked servant is what they did with the talent.
Now in his biblical teaching, Maximizing Your Talents, author and teacher Arthur Bailey shares biblical truths on how to live and utilize the resources YeHoVaH has trusted with you and placed in your hands.
When we stand before the Almighty, we will hear these words, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Now, for your gift of $20 or more, Arthur would like to send as his gift to you this DVD teaching, Maximizing Your Talents. Call the number on your screen or visit our website or write Arthur Bailey Ministries, P.O. Box 1182, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29716.
In this teaching, I will explain the importance and how you can maximize your talents.
In keeping of the Fall Feast of YeHoVaH, you will learn about our Creator and His expectation for His creation. In Arthur Bailey's teaching, The Fall Feast of YeHoVaH, he will not only provide insight and understanding of the prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come, but will help each of us understand how to celebrate these amazing days in ways that pleases YeHoVaH. We will learn how to approach the Almighty, how to worship Him in the ways He wants to be worshiped, and how to be found well-pleasing in His sight.
The Fall Feast of YeHoVaH is a must-have for every true believer. In this teaching, I explain the significance of the Fall Feast of YeHoVaH and their importance in the believer's life today. You need this teaching.
Now, for your gift of $65 or more, Arthur would like to send this DVD collection, The Fall Feast of YeHoVaH. Call the number on your screen, visit our website, or write Arthur Bailey Ministries, P.O. Box 1182, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29716.